I didn't hear anybody screaming there after dinner. Other arguments, but we stayed down there later. Right? And she loves family, like they don't do that. Adults don't do that. And that was all for me.
Jonah was on the board. George 3 against. Jonah was Larry Johnson. Right?
Yeah.
Which home? Yeah.
Yeah. That's nice, huh? Oh, yeah, right here too, for you. Yes, they can go through with the larger super. Okay. I'll just sit there.
This is
It's like a separate organization. Started in so it's like different cities becoming very history and foundation. So I think so you guys are part of it. Like a whole bunch of cities all across America. That coalition that we have to apply to, or your city has to be in or have a certain amount of steps to like have so I guess they're kind of for cities to have like funds for certain programs, have like where to be your city was recognized as mostly it's like, oh, I should raise that money. That's not fine. So the city wants to understand. And so with that, it just opportunity to start reading enhancements. And so I'm curious if this is right.
I'll pull one, you'll get them out there.
Downtown, like it's making a better conversation, how to, you know, have more like.
I'll get them.
We'll see. She's like our city, not our city. stuff, like, you know, that's all stuff. That's so funny. He had reached out to me, those concerns, and wanted me to like sign and ask like the support system. And so I was she was like, I think you should just like it is neat. Yeah, for sure. It is neat, but like I'm also challenged with how like
But they're around the town.
Guess not. I guess they're taking away right here. It's like a tunnel.
What's that?
Oh, please.
Party down here today. I thought we were gonna be in traffic.
I know it was like this last. I might be interested to stay Where they're talking about financing.
I want to know.
Roger, what's the word? I don't know where I
That's how they're
really
really.
I don't know where else to put it. You gotta walk, right? Sure, you got a bigger
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started. I was waiting for some late arrivals. Welcome. I'm excited to see this many people showing up and being involved. It's really encouraging to see. So thank you for coming. As many of you know, our infrastructure is outlived its productive life. So it's time to kick off our downtown Reconstruction project, if you will. I'm going to let these guys get into the weeds of it, but this is going to be a really important project for the city of Buchanan. And it's going to be difficult. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. It's going to be really difficult to close down downtown for an extended amount of time. But I look at it as an opportunity to rebuild the city the way we want to leave it for our kids and our grandkids. And I mean that. I think it's such an exciting opportunity to leave all of our handprints on downtown. And if we plan accordingly and we act proactively on some of the things that we know we need to do, I think we can get through it. And I'm looking forward to doing that. And the other way that's going to work is if we listen to one another and we're respectful of one another, we listen to one another's ideas. I don't have any doubt that it's going to be a huge success. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Rich Murphy. And he's going to get us started. Yeah. Thank you, Margie.
I love to see this full room. I'm Rich Murphy, Community Development Director, City of Buchanan, and it's an exciting night for Buchanan. Mayor mentioned, like thousands of cities across the United States, we have old infrastructure. In the City of Buchanan, we're stepping up to address it. So it's a daunting challenge, but the first order of business, if you want to solve a problem, was to measure.
Volume off. I know I am, I'm sorry.
Was to measure the problem. So the city engaged with Premier Newhoff for a 3-year assessment of our infrastructure. They did that work. They came back largely with the message that, yeah, your stuff is old and it needs to be updated. We then brought that message to the commission, city commission. The team was then formed, and I had the pleasure to work with these two gentlemen, lead engineer Mike Schwartz and landscape architect Matt Lewandowski. And feeling really good about the talent that's been brought to the city to kind of address the infrastructure, but at the same time to address the downtown, because if we're gonna fix the stuff under the downtown streets, the sewer and water, we have to address the streetscape itself and put it back the way we love it, and maybe a bit better than that. So to date, this is kind of what's brought us to this public meeting. We had the introduction of the infrastructure assessment to the city commission in 2021. The engineer presented the project overview to the city commission earlier this year in 2022. Mike Schwartz did that. Along the way, we've been working with our financial advisor on our USDA loan, assessing the rates, assessing our level of borrowing, of loan power. And so that's something that's been happening as we assess the amount of resources that we may have available for this project. I mentioned that a big part of the project, and maybe the part that you'll feel most as a resident or a business person in Buchanan, is the downtown project. Now, this team has just worked on a total downtown reconstruction project in Vicksburg, Michigan. So they've just been kind of on the heels of it. They went through this entire process. And when I asked them what they could learn about that process, that they could bring to us, the number one theme was, don't sugarcoat it, it's gonna be a challenge. So we're gonna have to communicate, we're gonna have to address problems proactively, and keep our tempers and look at the prize. The prize is gonna be new infrastructure. The prize is gonna be some amazing, I think, improvements to, our mission is always, we love downtown Buchanan. We love it the way it is. Let's put it back the way it is and a little bit better. So that's our goal. Tonight, over the last several months, I'll just say, we've been working with the team, assessing the scope of the project, introducing a concept for design. So you're gonna hear from Mike Schwartz on the overall project concept, and then you're gonna hear from Matt, who's gonna really drill down into the streetscape and share some cool stuff, cool ideas of what could happen downtown, and also some sketches about elevations and what a neighborhood might look like looking this way or that way. So where a lot of you were involved in the Vision for Buchanan project with Andrews University that looked at downtown Buchanan, and we took those recommendations from out of that very large public engagement project, and we took those recommendations and kind of made those as a starting point of, if we're gonna make improvements for downtown Buchanan, we're going to take those recommendations. So the Vision for Buchanan recommendations were the baseline, and then we, throughout discussions with our leadership and with our administration and goals and resources, we've been kind of honing in on a rough draft of a concept. So this is a very much rough draft, work in progress. As we said, we want to invite you guys to, at this early stage in the process, first of all, to understand what's been going on over the last several months, what we've been doing. We want to be transparent, and also to get your ideas at this early stage of the project. So I think this is the agenda tonight, and really there's two gears. One is going to be the overall project formal presentation. Mike and Matt will lead us through. And then the second gear is really going to be we want you to come up and talk to us about questions. And we want you to make comments on a card, or to us directly. We want you to feel free to ask, hey, well, I live here, I have a business here, what's happening here? Can you explain to me what's happening here? And so we want you to have that free flow of discussion, and we're gonna be having more communication ongoing about this project. Tonight's just the first kind of kickoff meeting, and we have a concept to discuss. So with that, I'll introduce Mike Schwartz to take us to the project board. Thank you.
I'll come up here since everybody else did.
Real quickly, before you start speaking, I wanna make sure everyone's aware, we do have the pizza, this was promised as the pizza party. If you guys wanna come just one at a time, or however you wanna come through here, this door right to the left is the pizza, and then you're on a table, we've got some drinks as well. Thank you.
That's hard.
I know that, my God, lost some words. Everybody started with a pizza or what? Pizza or what?
It'll stay warm for a while, it's
As Rich mentioned, I'm Mike Schwartz from Prine and Newhoff. I've been studying the infrastructure down here probably since before 2013. Back in 2013, the city applied for a grant through Eagle to study their infrastructure. So at that time, it's 2016 to 18. We studied the storm and sanitary and the wastewater treatment plant and basically all the infrastructure of the city of Bronx. Losing my thought, I'm thinking pizza right now. City of Buchanan. So what we came back with after 3 years, after analyzing all the infrastructure, is we kind of grouped these various 30 projects, and we knew that the city could not do that many projects over a short period of time. So we looked at the most critical infrastructure, the stuff that was most necessary for the system. And it turned out the majority of that was right in the downtown core area. Most of that infrastructure was from the 1920s, 1930s. It's basically reached its useful life of 100 years. So we kind of started figuring out what to do. So we studied, all the infrastructure, but this is kind of the project area we're going to be talking about for the infrastructure project itself, which is a lot bigger than just the downtown. But I know most people want to know is what's happening in the downtown. As part of the infrastructure, we're basically removing the roads, the driveways, the sidewalks, to get down to the sanitary sewers, the storm sewers, the water mains. So that's why we're ending up doing new surface improvements, because we're ripping everything up to get to the utilities and put new stuff in. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit more tonight, is what the surface improvements are going to look like. So since that time, as Rich mentioned, we've been to the council a couple times, explaining the projects, giving them updates. The city has secured funding through USDA for this project about $14.5 million. They've also secured funding through MDOT and for some restoration on Front Street and a new street light at Oak and Front. So they're working with their financial advisor to figure out what that addresses for rates. But there are actually two projects involved with the USDA. One we're not going to really talk about tonight, other than I'll mention. The city's working on getting a new well and an iron treatment plant built there, and it's at the former DPW building that's been ripped down. I can never remember the address, but down at the bottom of the hill. But that's one of the projects, but we're talking about the downtown infrastructure project. That's what most of the staff has been involved at this type level here. We've been looking at doing this as 2 phases. We don't have the phases completely defined yet. This was a rough discussion back in when we first started talking to council what this might look like, with the red being phase 1 and then the yellow being phase 2. That way we was hoping not to tear up all the access to downtown at the same year, such like that. And the orange was could be built in phase 2 or phase 1, depending on how much work was in each phase, what the contractor wanted to do. Where those phase limits ultimately end up is still up in the air. There's still a lot of questions on this. The general scope of this project, we're hoping to have some type of construction in 2023, but right now it's a really bad environment. I should say bad, difficult environment. Material supplies, contractor supplies, just a lot of issues with everything. We've got design permits, the whole 9 yards to make it through to get to the construction bidding, contractors on board. So we're hoping to have something done in 2023. Likely it will probably roll into 2020. Most of it will probably be 24, probably carry into 25. As the mayor mentioned, this will not be a fun project. It'll be a great project when it's all said and done. It'll be beautiful, people love it and such, but it will be very inconvenient. There'll be a lot of communication necessary to make this project successful. Accesses to buildings, getting your patrons into your building doors. How do we do that? Where can they park? Getting signage put up there. And it's almost a daily communications that are necessary. It's not like you won't see where the contractor's working. There will generally be a big hole. It doesn't like jump from one big spot to another spot. They move pretty slow moving across. So generally you see the pace of construction as you go along. So, but there is a lot of communications all through the project to make this a successful one in the end. Let's see what else I want to mention. We did not have yet a start date yet. We're still figuring out what that is, but like I mentioned, it's probably we'd like to see something happen in 23. It's always been anticipated that this will be a 2-year project. Unfortunately, what most people like to see is the final product, especially the pretty concrete and the sidewalks and the stamped concretes and the new benches and all that fun stuff. But that will take some time to get to that point to get the infrastructure into there. So I know most of you have all been staring at these beautiful colored renditions like I've been for months. So at this point, I'm going to kind of turn it over to Matt to kind of talk about what some of these concepts might look like for discussion, and then we can have, like you mentioned, a smaller roundtable and see where public input might be at this point. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Mike. It is 5:24, and I think our goal is to get wrapped up by, I think we have plenty of time. So, all right, so again, my name is Matt Levineski. I'm a landscape architect with Pine and Newhoff. I'm the guy that gets to come in and do all the fun above ground stuff while the engineers work behind the scenes, making sure that our ideas are functional and constructible. And so what I want to first stress is, and if I'll see if I can get this mouse to work from up here, is the scope of the area that I was kind of tasked to look at as the landscape architect is the focus of the downtown. So you'll see in red here, for me, now the project does go beyond that. If you saw in Mike's drawings, there are some roads, curb, sidewalk improvements that are happening outside of these red areas. But for my purposes of reconstructing the downtown, what we're considering streetscape improvement areas, this is kind of the area that I've been focused in. Like Mike said, there's potential that some of these edges may extend or change slightly, but for now, that's for the purposes of today's meeting and then the drawings that you'll see, this is kind of the area that I was tasked to kind of look within. Before I get into explaining the concept, I kind of want to take a minute and just give everybody a visual reminder of your awesome downtown and then talk about some of the things that I saw as kind of an outsider walking in. And after going through the awesome plan that Andrew's put together, that was really the main focus of what I was tasked to do, to take all the cool hard work that you guys had done with Andrew's and then see if we can bring it into that next level of design. See if we can come up with an implementation plan that follows the route of where all the utilities have to get replaced, really. So that's how this map was created. Where are we taking out roads and sidewalks that I need to put back in a way that is as good as it was and a little bit better. So we'll quickly walk through some photos of the existing downtown. All right, so one of the things I want to emphasize that Mike has said too, anytime you work on a project of this magnitude, there's a lot of heart involved. There's many, many hundreds of hours and years of blood, sweat, and tears to get this beautiful downtown you have. What I learned is that you guys love your downtown. So my goal is not to change it. I don't want to make your downtown different than what you had. We're going to try to make it better. The things that I learned, you love your American flags, you love your banners. I do too, I think they're really cool. You have a classic downtown. You have a downtown with great sidewalks. You have a downtown with historical light poles. You've got this great river that runs through town that you can get glimpses of here and there. You've got a downtown that has really cool roads that bring you down into the, you come down Front Street from both ways, and it's not a lot of downtowns function that way, so you get some really cool views coming into town. All of these things, really, the mills, like you have historical character, you have awesome bones. We have some bones that are older, we're gonna replace the sewer water, but like, the bones of what you have is an amazing downtown here, so I wanted to point that out first and foremost. But I do think there's some ways we can improve, so let's take a look at just a few of these roads. So here's obviously, this is Redbud Trail coming to town right near us here. One of the first things I noticed, it's a very wide road. One of the things that Rich tasked me with was how can we make the park feel more connected to downtown? How can we make the roads not feel so vehicular focused so that when pedestrians and visitors are out, they feel safe walking around? There's a few challenges with Redbud, it's width, and then I'll show a couple more pictures. The sidewalk on one side is really tight. If you're walking down it, you guys probably kind of want to walk single file, because if the trucks are flying through, it's a little scary. So let's see if we can improve that. On the other side of the road, there's this nice little commercial district that has a sidewalk there. Maybe there's a way we can extend some of the character of downtown up that street. Well, let's take a look and see if we can do that. Okay, moving down to the intersection of Redbud and Front Street, we also have another road, Reinerson, that kind of comes in there at an angle. As you can see in this picture, and you guys live here, I know you, but just a reminder, there's a lot going on. You've got lights, poles, power lines, pedestrian buttons, crosswalks, cars crossing, cars not sure who's going at times, and it's a little bit of a safety risk, if I'll be honest with you. Now, I haven't heard any actual crash or safety data, but I would imagine that there is challenges with the intersection. So this is an area for me of maybe some potential improvement. So take a look at that a little bit further. Okay, going through the downtown, got a nice sidewalk here, but there are places where you can tell it feels a little tight, right? You've been to some of the downtowns in Michigan that really come alive. I live in Holland. There's other downtowns with nice wide sidewalks. So one of my thoughts was, could we widen the sidewalks? And that's something that the Andrews plan identified too. Is there a way we can get the streetscape a little wider so that you've got more opportunities for dining along the street, you've got better space for parades, and it also tightens the road up a little bit, which actually improves safety and causes cars to slow down. So one of the things, and since we're going to be replacing all the utilities in the street and everything you see in this drawing is going to be removed, maybe we can put it back a little better dimension, something that's a little bit more human focused and a little bit less car focused. Moving down to, I believe this is the corner of Oak Street in front. Not a whole lot on this end that's troubling at all. I just wanted to point out the corner here. So you've got the great entrance from the west. Brick pavers on the corner, you've got your banners. There's really not a whole lot we need to do in this area, but we're gonna try to find ways to improve it again by making the crosswalks a little shorter potentially, and making sure we still have banners, light poles. And I forgot to mention the planter pots from the hanging. Those are definitely very important. We're gonna make sure we still have the flower pots because it looks gorgeous. So that's that intersection. But now if you turn up Oak Street, it's not quite as attractive. I think there's some good potential here too though. So we have kind of a skinny sidewalk that's reached the end of its life, very normal at that age. The building is quite close here. We've got a little parking on one side. The curb is kind of irregular through that area. It's not consistent all the way down. I think there's some ways here we can improve the streetscape by bringing some decorative paving down that way. Maybe some extend the decorative light poles. Maybe we can add some more parking. Let's try to get some more parking into downtown. Moving north onto Main Street, again, great, awesome restaurant on the corner here. We've got a little bit of outdoor dining space, but hey, maybe they could use a little more. So we're gonna see, can we improve Main Street, widen it, add parking to it, reconfigure the curbs just a little bit so we can squeeze a few more feet out of that sidewalk, and it'll make all the difference, not only for this business on the corner, but all of the businesses along the corridor too. So, and again, I noticed we don't have decorative paving or decorative light poles, benches, flower pots, those kind of things are not extending up Main Street. But what I learned was Main Street, although it may not be the highest traffic road, it is a main corridor coming into town. So let's see if we can get visitors and people coming in to identify that as part of your downtown, not just a road that eventually gets to downtown. It's a key part of the downtown. Again, looking, this is on the other side of the street here, Main Street South. Same thing as kind of the other side, nice sidewalk. Maybe we can make it a little bit wider. And then there's Dewey Street, and Dewey Street has some unique challenges to it too. It's quite a wide road right now. The sidewalk connectivity, as you can see in this sketch here, drawing here, is pretty tight. Some of the businesses butt up to the road a little bit. I think with a little bit of work to tighten up the edges a little bit, you can make wider sidewalks. Maybe we can, again, carve out a few more parking spaces for the downtown on Dewey Street, as well as through a little bit of creative landscape work, maybe we can, there's a lot of pavement on Dewey. If you've been back there, you can see the big parking lot from the road. Maybe we can find a way to kind of dress up that a little bit so that the views into all of the paving are a little bit more disguised in a way that beautifies it. So moving into the big overall plan, this is the same drawing you see on the boards. You guys will get a chance later to kind of go through the details with us, and we can, I want to emphasize too that this is still a conceptual plan. Like I was asked to do some dreaming, and Heather said, think big picture. I'm trying to think big picture here. Our hope is that we can do as many of these things as possible. So that is the goal as we work through the design and refine the design, bring more cost in the picture, see what's working on the budget side of things. We're going to see if we can accomplish as much of this as possible. We're still figuring that out, but just wanted to kind of put that up front. One thing I wanted to know too was overall parking. Downtown parking, I know it's very important. Vicksburg had the same situation. Parking, well, first of all, this is my opinion, I guess, but I think parking problems in a downtown are a good problem to have. It means people are coming, people love visiting. When you've got all this investment into the downtown, you're gonna find that more investment starts to come in, and people, they're willing to walk 4, 5, 6 blocks to go to your business because the spaces are just so engaging. So one of the things that I wanted to point out is our goal was to increase parking in the downtown. Right now we feel we can do that. So it doesn't mean that maybe on one section of the street that the parking count went down by 2, but around the corner it went up by 4. So think of it that way a little bit as we go through this, because I do believe that to get the pedestrian spaces that are really going to activate the downtown, it is important to make sure that you're physically prioritizing people over cars. So that was one of the goals of this space, and that's what came up as well in the Andrews plan. How can we make this downtown feel more for people than for cars? I know that the trucks come rumbling down the hill from the west right through downtown, and thankfully, we are allowed to do this because it's not, the lane widths are not restricted by MDOT. You guys have control over your roads and what width they want can be. And what we've been told is, let's make it a little bit less friendly on big trucks. We still need to get the deliveries there. We gotta get the deliveries there. But let's try to slow the cars down so people can cross the street and not worry. One of the intersections that was really apparent with Main Street, when you come down to the intersection at Main Street, if cars are coming from the west, you really gotta stick your nose out and take a look, and it's a little bit, you gotta kind of just find a spot and go for it. You guys have all done that. I've been here 5 or 6 times. It's happened almost every time I've been here. So I guess what I'll do next is I'll kind of go street by street, and then at the end, again, we're gonna have plenty of time for questions and comments. You can come talk to us directly, criticize the design, that's okay. So we'll start with with Redbud Street. On the left is kind of the vertical view of it. I guess I'll start with looking at the plan view. As you come down the street, one of the things that's just slightly out of the view is we're proposing, and you probably caught onto this by staring at this map the whole time, is we're proposing to drop it down from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. One one north, one south with a turn lane. What that does is it allows you to open up the whole row of parking on the east side, as well as now we can consider parking on the west side, which is one of our ways we're trying to pull the downtown over to the park side. The orange area you see there on the plan, that's where we're proposing some additional decorative paving, some more planter areas, light poles, bike racks. We have a banner pole, and then I guess I should have started with maybe the road alignment, but even one block north of Dewey, I think it's 3rd Street, starting, well, even all the way up another street north of there, we're gonna be transitioning from 4 to 3 lanes, ideally, starting at 3rd Street. So there's a whole nother row of parking that just off my map, you can kind of start to see the start of it. Right here, there's another 4 or 5 spaces on the west side as well. So that's kind of the big change. The goal, again, to slow things down a little. Let's make it a little less comfortable for trucks. It still works for trucks. The plan is right now to have 11-foot lanes. That's actually what they are now. But basically, we just took over 1 lane for parking. And then on the west side, we have 4 parallel spots here with a retaining wall. To be able to bump that out and build that additional parking would require, which we think you should do anyways, to widen the sidewalk. We need to rebuild the retaining wall, making sure that we're not getting into the memorial, that we're still making sure that we're honoring that space and it fits. We actually went out and measured it the other day. It does fit. I think we can make it look really nice to rebuild that retaining wall to include 4 more parking spaces. And then the big image here, probably the one item that's going to be the most exciting, the most positively encouraging, is what could this be like if we were able to close Reinerson? It would simplify traffic movements. It allows you to have shorter crosswalks. It gives you an opportunity to visually improve the intersection. We can introduce decorative paving. We can open up the views into and create what we're kind of viewing as a pedestrian connection into the Liberty Heights neighborhood. So this is the positive spin on traffic movement changes. Now, obviously, there's a learning curve there. I know there's going to be people who don't like it. It's going to be a little bit of a change. But I do personally, I'm a landscape architect, so I'm biased, but I think personally, the positives will outweigh the negatives in the long run. If you can get over the traffic movement changes, and you guys can all imagine what you'll need to do to get to the downtown, but this is a visual to kind of help you see what could be possible. Now, right now I'm showing a couple of decorative columns, some benches, decorative paving, this guy riding his bike down the street where the road's, basically just a 1-lane road for pedestrians at that point. We're still gonna maintain access to the Moose Lodge, to the gas station, but we will need to improve the road behind the gas station. I forget the name of the road there. Yeah, to make sure that's 2-way, so now we need to make sure we have 2-way traffic on that road. So this is what we could do. So in the middle here, this is again a concept we're still vetting if it's gonna be feasible in the budgets, but some communities you've seen this is a cool place to do some decorative art in the intersection. So I've got a little idea here for some decorative art in the intersection. Mike and I talked about, how do we make a better connection to the park? Well, one of the ways to do that would be right now, as much as the Buchanan sign is nice, there's nothing wrong with the Buchanan sign that's out there now with the plantings, but it does kind of block your view into the park and you kind of feel like you gotta go around it. What if that became your new, an archway became your new welcome to Buchanan sign? And that's kind of what I'm visualizing here, an arch that leads you into the park instead of, and it also serves as a welcome to Buchanan sign. One of the things too that I thought of and really hope we can do this, it'd be really cool. I did some research with the help of the team here with the history and Clark Industries used to make these cool axles, that's during the war effort. How cool it'd be, I hope somebody can find a couple that may be laying around somewhere, or we could replicate it, but let's incorporate some of your unique history into some of the architecture. So this is a couple of axles that are kind of holding up that arch. I thought that's a cool way to honor the history here, right? And that idea of honoring the history through architecture kind of would go through the downtown in other ways too. But that's just one way we could consider doing it here. So that's what it could look like to go to a 4-lane intersection. All right, now moving on to Front Street. So on Front Street, what was identified in the, I think the main takeaway for Front Street is, again, widening sidewalks. So what we're hoping to do here, 11-foot drive aisles. What we're figuring out is the road, or the building alignment's not perfectly straight all the way down. So we think we can get approximately 14 to 15-foot sidewalks on both sides of the street, where you have now currently about, on the low end, 12.5 to 15. Right now, there's a wider sidewalk actually on the south side. I don't know if anybody knew that, but the sidewalk on the south side is slightly wider than on the north side. We're gonna try to center that up so it's more balanced. But even if we couldn't, the overall improvement to each sidewalk, what we figured, Mike, was about 2.5 to 3 feet on average. So gives you enough room to, again, do al fresco dining along the road. Again, in these drawings, the colored areas are decorative pavers or some sort of decorative pavement. We're gonna see if we can reuse your brick. We can't commit to that completely yet, but we're gonna try to reuse your brick, or at least put back the same look you have with brick. And then what you see in the plans here too is a way of trying to signal you're in the downtown and this is a special area. One of the concepts is to do some columns. So these little blue dots here would be like a 3-foot by 3-foot by 4-foot tall column, something to that effect. That it's just a little architectural feature that, again, honors the history, but it kind of is a vertical element. And we haven't nailed down exactly how many of them we're going to use, but there's some kind of visual element that says you're in downtown. It's a new architectural feature. All the little green areas would be landscaping in front of the gas station. Again, because we are claiming more sidewalk here, we're going to be able to make this a little more pedestrian friendly, even in front of the gas station. Try to incorporate a little bit of grass and some ornamental fencing. And then on the south side, still put back trees like you have, nice brick paver banding. Moving into this next section of Front Street here, we've got kind of a pattern that you'll see kind of goes all the way through it, where we've got benches with trees, light poles, trees, benches, and then sprinkling in those amenities in this kind of what we call it the furniture zone. It's that strip where the tree is basically that the tall guys don't want to get into. That's the furniture zone. That's where you do your decorative pavement, but then you still have concrete, standard concrete along the building, and that allows you to maintain a nice accessible sidewalk. I think big picture concept wise here, we have some placemaking opportunities that we're still working through, but this big arch you see here is kind of a creative idea that we came up with to maybe this becomes like the spot visitors or locals come and get a picture with the family when they come into town. So it doesn't have to say welcome to Buchanan, but the idea is that and those would be these blue spots here. So at the end of Days Avenue, on the opposite side, as a cool opportunity for really cool pedestrian space with what I'm calling a placemaking sign or placemaking opportunity. We also have that at the end of Main Street. So you're going down Main Street, and at the end, this acts as like the terminus or the end of your view shed. It's like what draws you in a little bit. Some kind of a cool artistic placemaking thing. It could be art. We're still kind of vetting vetting what that would look like. And we'd love some ideas from you guys if you have other ideas. One thing about this is that we found another historic picture. It'd be cool if we could do this. Would be when Clark was here, I believe they had the first power plant, and there was this thing called a dynamo. And the dynamo was basically the power generator. It's basically a big turbine. And this is meant to mimic that shape. And we actually have a cool picture of some guys way back in the early 1900s standing in front of the dynamo. And this would be another cool way to honor the history. I wish I brought that picture with me, but that's kind of the idea behind that concept. And then, as you look through the design too, we've tried to incorporate, Heather had talked about green infrastructure. How can we make this more, as we put it back, this is one of the ways to maybe take what's existing and make it a little bit better. Can we find ways to improve the sustainability or the green infrastructure of the downtown without going way above and beyond? So we felt like a real simple thing that we might end up doing, if the budget allows it yet, would be to do some permeable paving in the parking spaces. So the areas you see on there, this is kind of a light blue, not sure how it shows up, yeah, kind of a light blue. Those are areas we think could work well for a permeable paving material, which would allow water to soak in naturally into the ground in those areas, which takes some of the load off your storm drainage system and gives it time to soak in. Anyway, so we're still vetting that idea, but that was one of the ways to kind of pull some green infrastructure concept into the plan. And I think I'm going to use the next slide to go into the big, what I'm going to consider the big idea is kind of this living street. Now this first came up in the Buchanan plan from Andrews, and the idea initially came from what they proposed for Days Avenue. Now our plan, we're not quite sure how far down Days we're going to be able to go. It's going to be based on the utilities and how much of the utilities are being replaced, how far down Days Avenue. But either way, this was the idea that we kind of were building off of for not just Days Avenue, which obviously is right here, but for actually the whole downtown. Now, Andrew's plan did show decorative paving in kind of the same configuration I have here, up Main Street, down Front Street, and then all the way down Days. So I'm showing it to this point now, but one thing that we thought of here is how can we, again, make it more pedestrian friendly? And how can we slow the vehicles down? So one of the ideas we've come up with, which we're hoping we can do, is to do what we're calling a living street where there's no curb. To accomplish that, to transition from a curbed road here to a non-curbed road, we have a small section here that's ramped. So anybody who's driving downtown, almost like at the crosswalk, you have to slow down anyways. You're gonna slow down and go up a 6-inch ramp, just a little gentle ramp, and you're onto some decorative pavement of some sort. Visually, you see it's different. This is not a road I want to fly down. So on this end of Front Street, as well as the west end here, we're proposing this entire area is level. Now we have to have a little grade for water drainage, but functionally, the road is defined by the decorative paving. So we've got the one color designating the streetscape, where people are safe all the time. Then you've got other colors in the middle that represent what's the road, and that's a different color, and that visually defines the roadway. So you still have a definition of the two, but when the car's in there, they kind of feel like this is kind of a place for people, I'm gonna go slow. So we're calling this a living street. We've called it a tabletop. We still don't know what to call it. In Europe, they call it a Woonerf. I didn't want to use that term. I like living street, curbless street, I think is maybe how Andrews called it. But again, it just signifies this is a place for people. Cars, go ahead, come through, and you're gonna have to go a little slower. But we've still been able to maintain parking, in these areas. So there's 4 parking spaces here. I believe we have 5 or 6 in each of these spaces here. And we've only, I think, had to sacrifice 2 to 3 spaces on the whole road to get this cool vision going. And then that cool vision also turns its way up Main Street. So initially we were thinking going to here, but because we have great commercial buildings here, we thought, let's stretch that, and Andrew's plan showed, let's stretch that tabletop, this raised area all the way up Main Street, so the other ramped area is right here. That's basically, this is the driveway to get to the parking area. You're familiar with that spot? So you ramp up here. So anybody coming down Main Street would also slow down, ramp up, and then this is all level through here. So that's kind of the big, crazy idea. I think this is gonna make your community honestly a destination for visitors. I think it's something you'll be proud of. And we're gonna do it in a way that's not crazy. It's gonna be a way that kind of honors your history, and the visuals will match who you are. And I think that's in the details. That's the pavers, that's materials that we choose. So that's kind of the big idea for Front and Main Street. Yeah, okay, this is the overall, this is where I was going to talk about parking, but I already did that. Hold on, let me go back. I missed a couple roads. As you can see on Oak Street, there's parking there now. We're proposing to extend parking. We're proposing to create a couple bump outs at the crossroad right here with a decorative crosswalk. Pull some of the decorative paving up the street with light poles. And then as you come up to Dewey has some decorative paving at the intersection. And again, because we have parking, rather than run the curb line straight through, if you bump out, you get a little space for some plantings and a tree or a light pole. And that's kind of the whole theme all the way down Dewey too, where we've got parking. Let's take the advantage of that to create little green spaces for trees, little green spaces to soften it a little bit, since it's so much paving. And then we have another idea here. This is what I was mentioning before about this visually screening some of the parking. So I have right here a proposed screen wall or ornamental fence or landscaping, some kind of vertical element that would kind of visually block the view into the parking. It's not going to hide the parking, but it's just going to visually kind of clean it up a little bit, I guess I'd say. And then as you kind of work your way down Dewey Street to the sidewalks, I guess you could say in general, other than Front Street and Main Street, and the stretch here in front of these, anywhere there's commercial buildings, we're trying to get as wide as we can sidewalks. But on Dewey and Oak and this west side of Redbud, the sidewalks are less than 5 feet in a lot of places, so we're trying to get minimum 6 foot for those sidewalks so you can get two people passing each other. That's universally accessible, so that's what, it's like a handicap code or a universal accessible design. Would say that 6 feet is a good passing width for two people. So that was kind of like the minimum standard we want to kind of try to hit. Then lastly, I think I'll point out that we did try to carve out some parking on this far east section of Dewey Street across from the restaurant brewery here. Again, pulling people to the park a little bit more, and it's a space that is available, and the city owns it, so why not try to grab a couple more parking spots there? So, I think I covered most of everything I wanted to talk about. I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions, and like I said, this is a first draft concept. We really hope you guys can provide some feedback. I've been part of the community now for 6 to 9 months since I started working on it. You guys have been here a lot longer than me. Please, if you have ideas, if you have comments, if there's something that my design is not working, you don't think it's gonna work for some reason, you know very specifically, let me know. This is the first brush concept. It's a big picture idea, but I think it's something that you guys can work with. And what we've been saying all along, recently talking about the design is, wherever we end this project, there's still more to do, right? There's more dumb days, and there's things you want to do in other areas. Maybe some of the architectural features don't make the budget, but even if that's the case, we're going to set it up so that you can grow into it as you can. So that might mean, 4 parking spaces on this side of the road is not a priority for now, but it's ready for the future. All of these elements, we're going to try to set it up so it's ready for the future, so that at the end of these projects that are primarily utility focused, your streetscape is improved to this plan, and you have a way to move forward from there with next phases. There continues to be money coming from the state, different grants are available, you guys probably see about that all the time. There will be more opportunities, I think, for that kind of thing. So I'll stop talking now, let you guys ask questions. I guess, should we open it up to just general questions first and go right to the open house style format?
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's for you or for Mike, but I'm curious how, when we're doing the actual infrastructure work, how do we plan on being able to maintain that in the future so that we're not, I mean, do we bury that stuff again in a way that we can get to without destroying what we've just built? Or how do we make that so it's easily maintained?
Your infrastructure right now, we'll say, is easily maintainable. So some is better than others to get to. But sanitary has certain spacings to access it for CCTV work and cleaning, such like that. The same thing with the storm system. It's just a matter of where you put structures, valves, appurtenances to access that and be able to maintain your infrastructure. And so there are, just like in your roads now, there are castings scattered about. You're gonna still have castings. That's how you actually get to your buried infrastructure.
I think the good news partly is too that it's all going back into the same age. I think when you have a brand new streetscape on top of old sewer and water, now you're really worried about that streetscape a lot more, right? I think that is it. So now is a really good opportunity. Yeah, good question.
So the tabletop concept, pretty introducing.
Yep.
Where does that gradual incline expect to start on the map?
Sure. I'll go back to the.
Because is the colored section the peak of the, or is it like?
So the.
Start like block or half block ahead of that?
Correct. It would start here on the west side of, this is Maine coming down.
Okay.
On the west side of Maine, there's a section here, it's about a 10-foot long ramp. So it's not a speed bump, it's gradual. That's on this west end here. It's on the east end here. So here's Days Avenue, right? So it'd be on the east side of Days Avenue on this edge. And then for Main Street, I don't know how to describe it exactly, but it's just south of the drive entrance into the parking lot.
So it's like 10 feet.
Yep, it's about here at each one of those spots. It's about a 10-foot wide ramp up. You barely will visually notice it, other than the color changes, and you just come up. Yeah.
So why are we putting so much focus on to Dewey Street instead of Days Avenue? I said that, you said that might be something we came back to, but there's so much more that goes on down Days Avenue to the Common. Why would we go up Dewey Street and Main Street? I mean, granted, we could go up to Main Street to like Red Blood Insurance, but why are we gonna go all the way up there and to Dewey Street? Quite frankly, I mean, I don't know about y'all, but I mean, yeah, granted, that might be downtown, but that's not downtown in my mind.
I can answer I can answer part of that Dewey question. Is the interceptor sewer runs down Dewey. So it starts at the waste treatment plant, runs down 3rd Street, and cuts across Dewey Street. It actually runs through the parking lot. The primary interceptor that serves all the sanitary sewer goes through the parking lot and across Dewey Street. So that needs replaced, and hence is why we're up in Dewey Street for the original project for the infrastructure.
And the reason that it doesn't go as far down Days is it's only going to go down as far as this project replaces utility. What are you getting at sewer?
Yeah, so the intent is to get the utilities, so that the creek crosses right at that intersection. It kind of runs at a 45, as you probably know. So the intent at this point is to get the infrastructure just past the creek, so we can stop it, so that way when they go to do Day Street and anything south, they can connect on without going back into Front Street. So it's a kind of combination of where do we stop the utilities and where do we stop the streetscape to try to be able to continue that on for future phases.
I think I could add a little bit to this. Question is, right now, you don't think Dewey's in the downtown because of the way it looks. It's not a strong street. It doesn't have strong pedestrian connections. we gotta rip it up anyway. So all we're proposing is to put it back better and stronger.
Are we gonna have something where there's parking lot there, or is it there gonna be something that you're gonna wanna do over there other than parking?
Stronger sidewalks, more on-street parking, trees, intersection treatment.
And it's recognized privately owned too, so there's no. That's
Yeah, we're trying to set it up for the long term. I think some of the Andrews plans showed eventually some more aggressive development on Dewey Street. You know, in 100 years, you could have 3-story buildings on Dewey Street. This is trying to set that alignment up and get it ready for anything that could be possible. And now, in 100 years, people might think, oh wow, I can't believe Dewey, you know, used to be the way it is. Now we've got this other great investment that's happening on there. So.
Would there be a basis for extending Front Street to the Art Center and the post office?
That's a good idea.
Yeah, we did talk about that, and again, for the purposes of this project, I was tasked with following the utility replacement. And really, if it's outside of the area that needed utility replacement, it wasn't part of this phase. It's definitely something that I agree with should be looked at, right? That's a key part of the downtown.
We talked a lot about that question, the idea of stretching downtown, the idea of stretching the feeling that you have on Front Street into other areas, because that's the magic, right?
Yeah.
So I think that we tried to employ that spirit of that idea about stretching the downtown where it would apply the utilities. I agree that that's a worthy project to lasso Ross Sanders and the post office and stretch that magic. So, you know, but I don't know that it's necessarily your.
So you are gonna redo Front Street on Slope Office, still going downward.
Now with this phase, it stops at Elm Street, at the intersection, this project, this phase.
You might as well spend another $200,000 and redo that hill because it's so damn bumpy, you can't drink your glass of water coming down that hill.
When you start turning it up, when you actually start turning it up, do you go down where you take the road up, leave the sidewalks? Can you do it that way?
That's what they typically try to do. They try to maintain sidewalks at least on one side, keep it ADA accessible, maintain traffic where they can, for pedestrian purposes. So
Because
yeah.
the sewer system runs right down the middle of the road, doesn't it?
Yeah, the sanitary is intended to go right down the middle, which is the deepest of all the utilities. After that, the water will pick one side and the storm will pick the other side.
Does this include then going right to the buildings from the lines?
So yes, so we intend to replace the sanitary and water services to the buildings as necessary. We're also talking about another discussion yet about fire suppression. If the buildings would want future fire suppression for change in use of those two, but we haven't got that far down in the design and such on that nature. But yes, we are looking at that to make sure that, hey, if you had a galvanized, or you've heard probably lead services and stuff all over the place in the state, to make sure that you don't have any weird utilities or ladder galvanized utilities, that they're all, you know, properly up to code on Eagles.
Hand raising, so everyone hears the question.
Well, I was just gonna mention, on the picture you showed of Redbud, where the intersection of Front Street is, we saw a bunch of overhead utilities, and then in this drawing, I don't see overhead utilities. Is that the way it's gonna be?
That's our sincere hope. I've reached out to AEP, I've not yet received their response, I've reached out a few different times. I'm gonna get more insistent with them as we get closer, but we are hoping to do that.
Thank you.
I have a two-part question on the creek. The city has probably informed you that a good deal of our downtown is in the section called the flood zone. That creates a pretty heavy burden on the owners of buildings down there. They want to do any type of financing or anything that has any kind of destination. With the road being torn up on Days Avenue right there, and then all that corner of Front Street right there is all getting torn up as well. Is there anything that can be done to alleviate that, so those buildings can get out of that flood zone?
The flood zone, we'll say no, because the flood zone is based on the water elevation. and the building elevation, so you're not gonna get out of that. What we are gonna do is try to control the water level, so the groundwater does not come up higher or anything with new infrastructure. So some type of permanent, functional dewatering system, we'll call it, to keep the water table down in that area. But you will not get out of the flood zone because that's an elevation piece.
The hard part is some of us are paying like $15,000 actually, and we don't get a drink there. Because of that, it's like flood, yeah.
And it's just by the nature of the creek and storm events and such.
The second part, regards to the creek, the point thing is moving the trout stream, and as someone that cares a lot about that piece of it, when I hear diverting the creek, obviously that's gonna create sediment, there's a lot of things to think with that. Is there a process to, preserve the ecosystem as we're doing this necessary work?
Well, we are not rerouting the creek.
Okay.
So that is one thing we're not doing. We're not gonna move the creek, we're not changing that. That section through downtown's been built 4 different times to that culvert and such. We're not doing any of that. So what we're after is some other storms, reroutages in different directions, trying to control that. And yes, there is permits required all through Eagle. So that's its whole process in itself that will dictate probably when this project actually goes out for bid, is how slow Eagle drags their feet through this whole process.
Very good question. Next.
When there's torrential rain, the water flows down Front Street from the post office area, and I'm at the corner of Front and Main, and the water is typically at least 2 inches deep. Will your permeable system be able to absorb that? And how do we keep that out of my basement and my neighbor's basements?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, Mike can go into more of the details, but anytime we do permeable pavers, we do plan for the storm drainage, so it meets the big storm events like you're saying. The permeable pavers wouldn't be meant to take on all the water. There would still be overflow control, so that in a small rain event, it would function like your ground, it would soak through. But in a larger event, it has the ability to fill up and then switch into the storm drainage system. So that's how we typically set those up, whether it's a rain garden or permeable pavers. You always want to have your high flow scenarios covered. So that would be there. And yes, we are aware of that. I don't know that this project is going to necessarily fix any basement water issues. Our goal is not to cause any. So, go ahead.
2 questions. I assume it's cost prohibitive to have more sidewalks like they have in Holland?
I want that.
I'm
all for it. Who's got a lot of money?
Well, one thing we were discussing internally when we mentioned that same thing, wanting it ourselves as well, is that we are trying to pitch that idea specifically, if anyone in this room is working in the cannabis industry, you aren't gonna take offenses, but we're trying to pitch that specifically to our cannabis partners that have planted themselves here in our community, and ask if that can be something that they can contribute towards. Currently, I'm trying to help make sure that there's some language included in that bill that's being considered by the Michigan legislature that would allow businesses to make, not just tax deductible, but get tax credits for donations made to entities such as ourselves, the city of Buchanan, that can do quote-unquote community development projects for which that would qualify. So my goal is to make sure that that legislation allows cannabis industry to do that, and then pitch to them once that's passed. Hey, you can get a nice tax credit by helping to improve the sidewalks that will allow your customers to continue to shop in the wintertime in Buchanan. So hopefully that will occur, but yeah, we're definitely striving for that, open for more ideas for how we can make that a reality. That's a goal, but it is very cost prohibitive, so it'll depend on a lot of factors.
And the second question is, you mentioned colors separating the street and the open road plan, or the, what did you call it, the living road?
Yes.
For universal accessibility wise, what will you do for blind persons so that they don't accidentally wander into the road part?
Correct. Yeah, so that's a really good question. Part of how you do that is with, there still will be a slight physical difference, as well as the visual difference. But then, and we also have crosswalks The crosswalks will still function like a standard crosswalk, you'll still have the truncated,
Domes, ADA domes.
ADA dome, there's a lot of different ways they call that, but the detectable warning device right there for the crosswalk is still gonna be included. And there's a chance that you'd want to, we may end up including that over a larger stretch of the road for that reason. Yeah. But that's a really good point. Yep.
I'm at Days in Front Street, and I like the concept and the idea that you have for the elevated sections to slow down traffic.
Yeah.
However, I've been here for 15 years and still do not understand why huge semi-trucks are allowed to barrel through town. I see it constantly every day. And it's not only a hazard, it's cracked windows downtown. The city is well aware of what the issues are.
Yeah.
So I don't understand why we're trying to install something that might deter big truck traffic, or why can't big truck traffic why can't it be a law or a city ordinance that they must travel around down Route 12 or wherever to stay away from Front Street?
Right.
With that said, the other thing I wanted to find out is utility, like Comcast, high-speed internet cables. Are there provisions for burying those cables? And tagging onto that, there's that big horrible structure in the middle of the commons with all the wires and everything going on there. It'd be great if that stuff could be eliminated, but I'm not sure if that's even part of this project. Your concept, I'm sorry, was it Kevin? I appreciate your concept. I was afraid that I would see something that looked like Coney Island. I was afraid we would see something like what they did in Bridgman with that weird crisscross thing over the road, which I heard is atrocious. I think I see a prairie, kind of a prairie-ishness to your design here, which I think is elegant. And I like the idea that you're trying to use park equipment, machinery concept to tag along with that. I can appreciate where you've gone here. I think it's a great idea at Front Street and Redbud Trail. I almost thought that was a roundabout when I first looked at it. But if there is something, if there is a focal point that can be installed in that intersection that would slow things down, I'm not quite sure yet how traffic would go around it. Maybe it would be easier than I'm envisioning. But I think that's another great idea to slow down traffic. Because U-turns and fast traffic is what we're dealing with the most downtown. And also the lack of parking. And I know you're trying to address that as best you can, but I can't express enough how the more parking, the better. And I know Cannabisa, Zenleaf, and Pinnacle have done a great job at trying to direct traffic to the back of their parking lots, but there's still a lot of traffic. Were you here on April 20th? The street, it was like traffic jam. It was like a big square traffic jam.
It's like tulip time in Holland, right?
But thank you.
I appreciate the feedback, definitely. And I think Mike, maybe you can address your first.
The Comcast questions, once we get a preliminary concept done for the design, where the back of curbs are, where our utilities are, we're reaching out to all the utilities to make sure that, hey, we didn't just put all this infrastructure, new table, or new everything in there, and then all of a sudden the gas company says, oh, we have a 1940s gas main that we need to replace. So that's very high on our priorities list to coordinate that and make sure that they have ways to expand. You know, like Heather mentioned, can we bury stuff? We leave that up to the private utilities. For example, in Vicksburg, we did lay some conduits for some fiber optics that, they don't have fiber optics in there, but we laid some conduits through the downtown that they can get from block to block for future utilities. But whether that happens, buried utilities, electrical lines, phones, and everything is a very pricey thing, and a lot of the private utility companies don't really like doing that.
No, and Comcast, it's a very convoluted cabling thing going on the north side of the street behind the buildings, and it's been a problem for a lot of people, residential and business-wise, to deal with Comcast.
And we're already looking at that as, we've done enough of the design to know where we're going on the radius improvements around the area, sidewalks for new ADAs at all the intersections and such like that. And there are poles that are definitely gonna have to get moved. Right now, they're either up against the curb, we're gonna widen that curb from 10-foot radius that was probably built because there was a pole there, make them move that pole out of the way, get it away from the sidewalks. So there will be some utility poles at least moved. Whether they'll bury that is, will still be up for discussion. We may not even know anything yet this year.
Okay.
What next step?
Just two more quick points. Ellen Rodan has brought up the fact that there are always fruit trees planted along the streets, which are a mess. So that's something to consider, the type of tree that's not gonna litter and have mushy crab apples on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
The other thing is, are we looking to replace the light poles in this project?
So we've talked about what that would look like if they would just be refurbished, like use the exact same ones, but you take them down, repaint them, sandblast them, do the whole thing. Whether they're new, it'll come down ultimately to probably budget and what the city decides as a staff level.
We have a great new residential community in the downtown area, and Michael, when your building's done and the other ones that are working on things, there'll be even more people living downtown, and currently those light poles shine right into our apartments.
Second floor windows.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's just,
Residential building.
so something to consider.
Okay, so they almost think one of those shields to not focus them down.
Actually, yeah, I mean, it was an accessory that.
Yeah, there's a lot of those type things, but that's a great point. Especially when you have that second story apartments or stuff above the storefronts. It's a great point to consider, so thank you.
Well, I think, let's take one more question, and then let's go into the open house grid. There's probably folks that want to say something or ask questions that maybe just want to come talk privately with us individually, and that's great. So I'll take your question, and then I think we can go to just the open dialogue time. You guys can get your pizza. I know there's another meeting back on, was at 7, so I want to leave a little time for the open house style discussion too. So go ahead, we'll take the last question here, and then we'll go to the open house.
Yeah, I love all of the designs, great job with that. I can understand the value here with consolidating the street a little bit, slow down traffic and widen the sidewalks for foot traffic. I think that's great. But going forward, how are we gonna be considering, more recreational activities such as biking or dog walking? Is there any plans at hand here to making, accessible ways for bikes to be working with traffic, as well as maybe dog drinking fountains or other, bike racks and other things to accommodate for tourists that come here that want to be using non-motor transportation, as well as people that live here?
Well, I know we're planning on including bike racks. We have not selected what they'll look like or where they'll go. But as we get into the detailed design, that will be coming up. That is something we're talking about. I know that's been something we talk about, Rich, is
Yeah, I mean, we
non-motorized connectivity.
we'd like to follow the model communities that have prioritized all this information. At the same time, every time we introduce bike lanes, we talk about, well, narrower lanes, or, now how our trucks can have radius to do whatever they need to do. So it comes down to, are we gonna have a consensus to kind of steal some space away from the big trucks, and do that kind of project? We have lined up some grant money for extended bike trails that will eventually connect to downtown Buchanan. So I think that we need to just keep talking. Certainly bike racks will be part of our downtown. We want to make these important connections, pedestrian connections. So, but we also need support from the community, because if we're going to change the way a street looks, we want to do so with the support of the community.
And if I may, real quickly on the point about trucks, I just want to share, as was mentioned, we are trying to discourage more trucks going downtown. Currently, it is listed as part of the county issued truck route, that is the truck route to go right down Front Street. So we are working in collaboration with the County Road Commission and our Planning Commission to see if we can't get that changed. But realistically, even if that comes off of the truck route, there are still businesses that will need deliveries. So we do have to make it, so even though we're discouraging through truck traffic, there will have to be enough turn radius for a truck to go through there when needed.
Awesome. Well, I guess on what I said, I think we'll go to the open house period real quick. And you can come see me directly with your question.
I actually had a comment to her.
Oh, okay, you wanna piggyback?
I know some of the problem too is the GPS routes the trucks to town. And
It
if you
is
get hold of
absolutely.
MDOT, you have them take that GPS and put it out to 12, that alleviates the problem. And we brought that up before and nothing's been done.
All right, thank you everybody for coming. Yeah, we've got pens, comment cards. Go go ahead, if you wanna leave your name and information, you can, you don't have to, but yeah, please, I'm gonna have myself station probably at these two boards, and I think Mike